or we'll lose it all anyway.
Okay, right now they're getting rid of the borders for a Pan-American Union. In the polls, 90+% of people in Arizona want the militia down there. What do you think should be done about the destruction of our national sovereignty to the globalists, Mr. Gibson?
Well, I've always been a great advocate of states' rights. They've been swindled out of them, the federal government, not just here, but in other countries too. As soon as you have a federal government, it infringes on all the state rights, which it was not given in the first place. The state reserved all its rights.
Doesn't the 17th Amendment tie into that, how they took the state's senators, which were appointed by the elected legislatures?
That's right. That's bad. I mean, they can supposedly subject to the people, and it doesn't mean that at all. It means subject to the party. And another thing we ought to get rid of is the party system. Because
absolutely.
We get somebody we send out there to represent us, and he represents us maybe here and there, but a few of them have done properly, but most of them simply take their orders from the party whip. They're not representing us. They're representing an oligarchy, a party.
And George Washington decried the two-party system. All right, thank you, Bill, for the call. TJ in Florida, you're on the air with Hutton Gibson. Go ahead, TJ, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Welcome.
Say, I think that Mel Gibson should make the pitcher Atlas Shrugged his next pitcher. I think this would wake up a lot of people and it wouldn't hurt anybody.
Hey, that'd be a good idea, or maybe a remake of 1984.
Or 1984. Say, you lived in Australia for a while. I lived in the Fiji Islands for 8 years. And when I came back to the United States, it was like coming back into a different world. Everyone was speaking a different language. Say, the Pope 23rd, John the 23rd, his name was Roncalli. He went to the same seminary as what Joseph Stalin did, and he was a Jesuit. And if you look up the Jesuits, they're a pretty frightening organization. I think Uncle Sam is acting more like Uncle Joe.
Well, let's get a response from Mr. Gibson. Would you like to comment on what TJ just said?
Well, Uncle Sam is certainly acting more like Uncle Joe all the time. I don't think Roncalli was a Jesuit. I'm not sure. I never heard that.
All right.
But I know that he was not a Catholic.
All right. Thank you for the call, TJ. Let's talk to John in Pennsylvania. John, you're on the air. Go ahead.
Thank you for taking my call. Mr. Gibson, I'm a Catholic, and I have a question for you. I'm a Franciscan of the Order of St. Francis of Assisi. And how could I get a hold of you? Are you in the United States?
Well, we're not here to give out his personal information, but, yes, Mr. Gibson is in Texas. Okay. Mr. Gibson, you've had a newsletter for decades that basically, just goes out. How can people get your newsletter? I think that's a good question.
And I have a follow-up if I can.
Okay, go ahead and follow up, then we'll get his answers.
Okay, Mr. Gibson, who is your bishop? I'm very surprised that somebody knows that we've had 40 anti-popes in the church. Our last valid pope was Pius XII. My question is, who is your bishop right now? Because for all I know, there's only 2 bishops left in the Catholic Church that haven't apostatized, and that's Bishop Vazelis in New York.
Okay, I'm gonna have to let you go. Go ahead and comment on what he had to say if you'd like, Mr. Gibson.
Well, there is Bishop Vazelis. He may or may not be a bishop, but he's not a Catholic bishop. The other one, I suppose, is of the same stripe.
So it's all.
I have no particular bishop. We are here without bishops. That's the trouble. There are bishops in the world, but they're not much in. I know there's none in Australia, and there's very few have even a claim to it anywhere else.
So they're basically all New World Order minions.
Yes, they belong to this phony new church.
All right.
Almost all of them, and we cannot recognize them as our superiors, or we join them. We're We either object to them or we follow them.
How do folks get your newsletter if they like to?
It's just write me, Hutton Gibson, at 13121 Luetta Road, PMB 205, Cyprus. That's the tree, not the island. CYPRESS. Texas 77429.
And how much is the newsletter?
Oh, I charge $5 a year. You might get. You're not guaranteed a number of issues. I try to get out 4 a year, which I've been doing for the last 7 or 8 anyway. At the moment, I'm a little short on material. I didn't get 4 out this past year.
All right. Well, I appreciate that information. That address one more time for folks that may have missed it.
13121 Luetta, Louetta Road, PMB 205. Cyprus, CYPRESS, Texas 77429.
And I want to make it clear that it's not just the Catholic Church, it's the Protestant churches, it's all the major organizations, it's the NRA, it's every group we're supposed to be able to count on. Every time I investigate them, they're run by top New World Order minions. Has that been your experience, Mr. Gibson?
Oh, yes. Yeah, the courts are run by them. Everybody seems to be in the soup.
Run by the globalist.
Yes.
Go ahead.
There's an exception there in the Chief Justice in the Alabama Supreme Court.
No, yeah, but he's under big-time attack.
Yes. He had the nerve to put the Bible in the Justice Building.
How dare him?
The state court.
Mark in Minnesota. Mark, you're on the air with Hutton Gibson. Go ahead, Mark.
Hey, gentlemen. These Chapter 501c3 laws, I've always thought it was kind of baffling because a church is prohibited from engaging in any sort of meaningful political activism.
But that's not true. The First Amendment clearly states government stays out of churches. Churches don't stay out of government.
Yeah, the way, of course, these laws are set up, churches are prohibited from engaging in any sort of meaningful political activism for being merely tax-exempt. But then the two major political parties whose sole purpose is to engage in political activism, not only are they tax-exempt, but they receive millions in taxpayer subsidies. And I think that's a little baffling. And then some people want nothing but entirely government-subsidized campaigns. And
well, I mean, Bush announced on Monday they're going to fund the green religion Gaia occultists. I mean, this is out of Mr. Gibson. Isn't this a total violation of the First Amendment?
Certainly. It does not belong in the religion business at all. It's there to listen to religion, not to make rules for it.
But first they created the reverse of that, where the government bosses the churches, and now they're going to have the government just take over the churches.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Folks, hold on just a second. That is textbook tyranny. Hold over, Mark. I'll let you finish up on the other side with our final segment, unless Mr. Gibson would like to stay over a little bit with us in the next hour. We'll ask him during the break. Our final segment to talk to Mark and Roger and Bradley and others. We'll be right back. Infowars.com, Infowars.net. Be sure and go to my website, get my documentary films, expose the terrorists. We'll be right back.
American. Thanks for listening to the M2K Talk.
Welcome back. Mr. Hutton Gibson, Father Mel Gibson, has agreed to stay with us 20 minutes into the next hour so that we can take all your calls. Plus, I have a lot of news items. I want to just mention a news item and get his response to that later in the next hour. Before we go back to Hutton Gibson and your calls, folks, I produced 8 full-length documentary films. I've written a book, Descent into Tyranny. You're authorized and encouraged to make copies of my videos for nonprofit educational purposes, because if we don't educate people, it's over. And the CIA, the globalists, carried out 9/11. That is an absolute, incontrovertible fact. The evidence is overwhelming. I've had to make 2 films and write a book to just cover some of the evidence. There's so much of it. Go to Infowars.com. Go to Infowars.net. Go to PrisonPlanet.com. Order the films today or call toll-free to get them. Don't procrastinate. They make great gifts. 1-888-253-3139. That's 888-253-3139 or Infowars.com or net to order the films. Or just write to me, Alex Jones, at 3001 South Lamar, Suite 100, Austin, Texas, 78704. The films are $25.95 a piece. If you order 3 or more, they drop down to $20. And again, you're authorized to make copies of them for nonprofit educational purposes. Take action, educate people, because they're going to keep blowing stuff up and then blaming it on imaginary enemies as a pretext for domestic police state crackdown with the Hegelian dialectic. And we got a bunch of callers here, and Mr. Gibson, we were talking to Mark in Minnesota. We'll bring Mark back up and Mr. Gibson back up. Mark was talking about this takeover of the First Amendment. Do you see any way to reverse this, Mr. Gibson?
Well, as far as I can see, there's a method of expatriation and repatriation.
What if just 10% of the churches said, no, we're not going to follow your orders? They could never enforce it on all of them. As you said, it's the leaders of the churches telling them to go along with this, isn't it?
Yes, it is, definitely. The idea that the government is giving you something by exempting your religious contributions is nonsense. The idea that they can tax your income is nonsense. Especially a working man, now he goes out, a tax is theoretically supposed to be on a gain. Man goes to work for another man, and he works for a certain wage, and this is a quid pro quo. He's putting in his labor for the other man's money. And there's no gain involved. It's a straight-out quid pro quo deal.
It's an unconstitutional tax. The income tax is unconstitutional.
It's certainly unconstitutional, but even before the Constitution, such a method would be criminal. And, of course, it started with Karl Marx, at least he's the man that publicized it, as one of the ways to put the Communist Party in charge.
And then our government adopted it. What does that make our government?
Communist.
Command and control. Finish up, Mark, with what you were saying real quick.
Yeah, Father Malachi Martin, before he passed away, he wrote numerous books talking about Satanism inside the Vatican and the Vatican's complicity in the New World Order. And I was just wondering if Mr. Gibson has read any of his work and what he had to say about Father Malachi Martin's
Okay,
work.
thanks for the call. We'll get his comment. Go ahead, Mr. Gibson.
I've read some of Malachi's works, and I think he was part of the plot.
So you think it was disinfo?
A good deal of it, yes.
All right, stay right there. We've got 20 more minutes left with Mr. Hutton Gibson, Father Mel Gibson, in the third hour. We'll talk to Roger and Bradley and John and Jim and many, many others. Toll-free number to join us on air, 1-800-259-9231. Third hour is coming up, and we'll cover news and your calls as well. Stay with us.
From his Central Texas Command Center, deep behind enemy lines, the information war continues. It's Alex Jones and the GCN Radio Network.
The information war continues. Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. until 2 p.m. Central Standard Time. Back from 9 to midnight Central Standard Time. The websites are Infowars.com and Infowars.net. We have the father of Mel Gibson, Hutton Gibson, an expert on the New World Order. I've been very impressed by his detailed knowledge because I've been studying it for a decade, been on the air for 8 years, and his knowledge is probably greater than mine on the history itself, whereas I studied the propaganda, the manipulation, the legislation day to day. It is really an honor to have him on the show talking about, parenting, history, the New World Order, and taking your calls, talking about the infiltration of the church, how the globalists are destroying our society. And a very interesting point was brought up. Father Malachi Martin wrote The Keys to This Blood and other books that I've read. only talked about some of the New World Order